coming out this evening and spending your time here at the Manor House for our community presentation series. We'll get in just a moment. I'll introduce you to Dr. Bosse, but first I want to give a big thank you not only to you all, but also to the Manor House, also to Bob Ehlers and team with Paramedic Network, community partners who work with us to put this out by Zoom across the world. So hello to anyone near and far that are jumping on. Welcome to you. And I know it's different time zones. We're in Cincinnati, Ohio. We're in Mason, Ohio, north of downtown Cincinnati. So thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Maria Solser. I'm an outreach specialist. I go out and grow the awareness for all the treatment we do at the Lindner Center. And to give you just a quick overview, the Lindner Center is in Mason, Vikings Island. We're 15 years old. We're a nonprofit. We do a lot of treatment. And I'm not going to walk you through. Some of you know the spiel I give every time, so I'm changing it up a little bit. Just to let you know, we do a lot of treatment there, and what that looks like would be from one side of things in terms of like inpatient, acute mental health. Folks are harmed to self, harm to others. And we go to the opposite side too of outpatient treatment. So we have psychologists, psychiatrists, and in between on that continuum of care, we do partial hospitalization. People go and come, working on coping skills, medication management. We do intensive outpatient for addiction and co-occurring, which happens to be virtual. We have a full continuum for eating disorders, which looks like inpatient, partial hospitalization, IOP, and an outpatient, Harold C. Schott outpatient team. We've got residential services for stabilization and comprehensive diagnostic assessment. We have an adolescent partial hospitalization program on site. We also do something called neuromodulation, which is for treatment-resistant depression. ECT, electroconvulsive therapy, TMS, transcranial magnetic stimulation, also on-site Spravato, ketamine, also for treatment-resistant depression. And we do have a rapid access service, which is something you can call and get an appointment 2 afternoons during the week. And that would be where someone could come in and meet with a psychiatrist, a social worker, talk about what's going on, and if needed, get medication prescribed as needed. And that's called rapid access. That was started because it was hard sometimes for people to get in to see a psychiatrist. So we wanted to bridge that gap. All in all, we take a lot of commercial insurance. On our residential side, we're private pay, that we can run commercial insurance to see if there's some reimbursement on the back end. Am I missing anything? It's a lot. I'll just tell you that. If I can be of help, my card is on the table. Don't hesitate to reach out. Don't forget to take the schedule of the community education presentations. Also, coming up May 19th, we have a community education day. It'll be here at the Manor House. It's $10. We have a MC that will speak, and then we break out into the different rooms for different topics. And all of the topics, presenters are providers from the Lindner Center. So it's a great kind of half day of learning and being together. So without further ado, we're here to hear about decision fatigue. This is Dr. Nicole Bosse. She's an outpatient psychologist at the Lindner Center, and I'll turn it over to her.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. Thanks for coming out, and luckily the weather cooperated a little bit. So I'm Dr. Nicole Bosse. I work at the Lindner Center in outpatient. I've been there since about 2012. And today I'm going to be talking about decision fatigue. So if we think of decision fatigue, how many people here feel like they struggle with decision fatigue? Fair amount of hands, maybe like family members you're here for as well. Okay. So if we think of decision fatigue, basically we're going to talk today about what is it, what consequences can happen with it. There's 4 common responses that people tend to fall into with decision fatigue, and I'll get into those. And then after that, I'll talk about different ways to cope with each of the categories that you might fall into. So we'll review those skills. And then I think we're gonna, I don't know if you mentioned this, but we're gonna hold questions to the end if anyone has questions. Okay, so decision fatigue is, basically it helps, it hinders people from making decisions. So, people tend to not be able to make as many decisions when they're fatigued. They also call it ego depletion. So if you come across that term, online. So what they found is that a human, has a hard time making decisions after they've made a lot of decisions. So, the more decisions you make throughout the day, the harder it gets. And it just kind of compounds upon each other. So the next slide shows the graph. So you can see as decision quality decreases, decision quantity increases. So the more the quantity you have, the higher quality, or sorry, the lower. So if you think of what can cause decision fatigue, so a lot of decisions every day can make someone have a fair amount of fatigue with making decisions. If your decisions impact a lot of people, so for instance, you know, if you have to make decisions about other family members, kids, loved ones, if you're like a boss or manager, and you have to make decisions for those people, that can make decisions even harder to make. Because you have to think of all of the possibilities, all of the people that it impacts. So that can often put a lot of pressure on people. Another factor that makes it harder is being in the middle of like a crisis situation or life circumstances that tend to be hard. So, like for instance, if someone is entering like retirement, or if someone had a death in the family, maybe parents passed away, there's a lot of decisions that go along with all of those pieces. Moving, switching jobs, graduating college, that sort of thing. With any major life change, there's lots and lots of decisions that happen. So that's gonna make that period of time especially hard for people. Then there's, if anyone struggles with uncertainty, which a lot of us do, I think every human struggles with uncertainty. If you're faced with uncertainty, it can be really hard to make a decision. You're wondering, okay, what's the correct decision that I should make? What might be the perfect answer? What might be good, bad options? And so not really knowing what to do causes a lot of fatigue for decision making. And then there's also perfectionistic tendencies. So people can kind of fall into the trap of not wanting to make any decisions because they want it to be the perfect decision. So they'll ruminate and analyze every possible decision, and then that just makes them more stressed because they then are thinking of all these other decisions and paths that they could follow. So perfectionistic tendencies can definitely kind of freeze the person when they're trying to make a choice. So if we think of how many decisions that we make in a day, can anyone guess without looking at your PowerPoint? Thousands, yeah. Yeah, it's a lot. When I was looking this up, I was surprised. So they say that the average person makes about 35,000 decisions per day.
I wonder what kind.
Yeah, no wonder we're tired, yeah. It's a lot. And these are, these aren't just decisions where, they're not major decisions, right? But they're decisions where they're kind of almost automatic, for instance. So, when I get up, do I want to like hit snooze or not? So you're kind of thinking quickly but that's quite a bit of decision making. And they say an average of like 2,000 decisions every hour, that's a lot of decisions. And then one decision every 2 seconds. And not doing something is a decision, right? So if you're like, oh, I want to say something, but then you choose not to, like that's a decision. So all throughout the day, we're kind of choosing what we want to do. And over time, that gets really hard. Especially if you throw in those other variables that I mentioned. So if we think of daily decisions, these are just some examples of daily decisions that people make every day. So, you know, what should I wear today? All the different options, right? Like if you're a woman, what jewelry, what earrings, you know, top or skirt, all kinds of decisions. If it's cold out, what do I want to put on? What should I eat for breakfast? So lots of different choices that can happen with that. What do I need to bring with me to work? How's my day gonna look? Do I need to pack anything for after work? That's like 3 decisions right there, just with that one question. What should I make or do for lunch? Which route should I drive to work? So, you know, do I need to check the traffic first? Do I need to make sure my car has gas? Do I need to stop at the gas station? Kind of planning all those different decisions. What should I do when I first arrive to work? Should I work out today? What should I make for dinner? Lots of food choices. What should I do after dinner? What do I need to do to prepare for tomorrow? Is it time for me to go to bed? What time do I need to go to bed? What do I have to do before I go to bed? And then the one I mentioned, like hitting snooze when you wake up. So those are just some very common examples, but there's lots of other ones, and there's lots of big decisions too that happen. So if we think of all the daily decisions that we have to make, so if we think of our brain like a gas tank, so every decision we make is kind of like using energy, right? So we're depleting the tank. And by the end of the day, we're kind of running on empty. We've, made whatever, 35,000 decisions by the end of the day. So we're kind of tired. And that kind of impacts the decisions we make, like we talked about earlier. So if we think of decision fatigue, there's some signs that they've studied with folks, and these are just a list of like the common ones, but you might notice some of these, like, oh, this sounds familiar. So feeling physically depleted, so just kind of exhausted, not having a ton of energy, brain fog. I'm sure everyone here has experienced at some point brain fog, but just feeling like you can't think clearly, you're kind of staring into space. Confusion, not really knowing what to do. Being irritable, especially if you feel like the pressure, right? Like, so if you feel like you have to make a decision soon and you don't know what to do and no one's helping you, you can get kind of irritable. Exhaustion, like I mentioned, regret. So a lot of times people will, after they make the decision, they'll kind of review it and ruminate. Oftentimes they'll wish they had chosen something else, which then leads to regret and then self-doubt. Am I going to make the right decision? What is the right decision? I'm not capable of making a decision. Feeling mentally drained, indecision. So again, not knowing what to do and just kind of not making the decision. Poor memory. If we're constantly thinking about all the decisions we have to make and figuring out which one to do, that kind of takes resources away from our memory. So we're not, remembering things when we're in this like heightened state as well. Sensitivity or reactivity to just different stimuli, different interactions with people. You might be just more on edge. Feeling overwhelmed. Again, there's, so many decisions to make, and if you have some of these pieces of not knowing what to do, right, that can feel very overwhelming. Anxiety can definitely happen with decision fatigue, and physical symptoms. So, bodily sensations that you might feel, if you're having to make a decision, you might feel like your heart's racing, or you might get like shaky or sweaty, especially if there's anxiety going on. Okay, so those are just different signs of decision fatigue. So now we're gonna get into the common reactions that people tend to have. So these are the four main ones. So hopefully you guys can kind of see which ones you might fall into. So one is procrastination. Does anyone feel like they procrastinate with any decisions they have to make? Yeah.
Do it with everything.
Yeah. It's easy to procrastinate. It's hard to do things sometimes. So procrastinating. So I'll deal with this later. Procrastination can help in the short term, but in the long term, it just makes things worse, because then you've got all these things piling up and you feel overwhelmed and pressured, right? So procrastination is one common reaction. There's also impulsivity, which is kind of the other side of the spectrum. So, oh, I'm just gonna, go shopping and go get a donut instead. I'll just, I'll just kind of like, not think about it, just do something impulsively to kind of distract myself maybe. Or just making a poor decision without really thinking it through. So kind of just, rapidly saying, oh, I'm gonna do this. Which again can have its consequences. Then there's indecision. So again, not knowing what to do. Your mind is kind of going through all the different possibilities that are there. Kind of ruminating on it. And then this leads to like confusion and overwhelm. The last one is avoidance. So this is another one that a lot of people fall into. So I can't deal with any of this. I'm just not going to make any decisions. So they, try to escape, avoid. Their mind shuts down entirely. And they may even forget they have to make decisions. So those are the four common reactions. Do people feel like they see themselves in any of those? Yeah, all of them. Yes, and you don't have to just fall into one all the time, right? Like you can bounce around. Yeah. Or you can, I don't know if you can have all of them at the same time, but that would be pretty impressive. So those are the reactions. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what to do about them. And how to cope with those when you find yourself falling into one of those categories. So different solutions. So if we think of coping styles, right? Like everyone copes with things differently. So you're gonna, depending on your coping style, you're gonna need a different skill. So, one skill isn't gonna work for the impulsive person, and also work for the procrastinator. So kind of figuring out what is your typical coping style and kind of navigating from there. And also what might work one day will not, maybe won't work for another day. It kind of depends on where you're at. Again, what category you fall into that day. One key thing with these is that practicing them is going to be the most helpful. So learning about skills is one thing, but if you don't practice it, it kind of is just more like intellectual. It's kind of in your mind, like, oh yeah, I learned about this. But once you kind of practice it and practice it often, it kind of becomes like muscle memory, right? Like, so your brain is kind of like, oh, I know what to do in this situation. I've practiced this before, and this was helpful. So I've always heard that, if you're going to learn, to swim, right, you're not gonna learn to swim in the middle of a storm or in the middle of a, tsunami, right? Like you're gonna learn when it's calm and relaxed. So that's when we wanna practice skills first and then use them when it's a little bit more treacherous. And then, again, so important to practice the skills when you don't need them. Just so you can get used to them, see what works, what doesn't work. So first we'll go over the procrastinator. So the procrastinator, if we think of that, that tends to be people that might be more perfectionistic. Not always, but usually, if people are wanting things to be perfect, they definitely avoid it because they feel like no matter what they do, it's perfect. So they're really trying to, avoid getting stuck and spending hours and hours on that. So noticing that and reducing it, if that's something that you notice, and giving yourself like a messy start on purpose, which kind of seems counterintuitive. But what happens, is, if you kind of go along the lines of, okay, I'm gonna like purposefully mess up this one little thing, that kind of takes the pressure off, and it kind of allows you to see that, okay, like maybe I'm having these ridiculously high standards and I don't need to. So it kind of just makes it seem not as daunting. So purposefully not trying to do something perfect. So for instance, if you think of decisions you have to make, like if you think of it on a scale of 1 to 10, how much impact that decision will make, that can really help you decide how much effort you want to put into the decision, right? So if it's a really big decision, if it's like a 10, that might, you might want to be spending more time on that, or, not just quickly choosing an option. If it's something that's not super big, then you can kind of just, okay, I'm just gonna randomly choose whatever this decision, and okay, that's not, not gonna impact me too much. So like, for instance, like, okay, what am I gonna eat for breakfast? Okay, maybe I'll grab like a slice of toast and a banana. Just kind of real quick, you just scan around the kitchen. So that's an option. Then, what happens with procrastinating and perfectionism is that people tend to rehash the decision a lot. So you make a decision, right? And then you think like, oh, I don't know if that's a good decision. Like, was that the best choice? So then you're ruminating and thinking what all the other decisions were that you could have made. Which then leads to more mental energy, more energy depletion. So try not to rehash decisions once you made them. And then, what can also be helpful, but is sometimes hard for people, is acknowledging that you made the best decision that you could at that moment. And giving yourself grace, right? Like, so no one is ever gonna make the perfect decision. It's kind of impossible to make a perfect decision. So just acknowledging like, okay, I chose the best I could, and I'm gonna go from there. So those are some different strategies for the procrastinator. And some of these other skills probably will apply as well for not the impulsive, but the undecided or the avoider. But keeping those pieces in mind if you find yourself falling into that category. For the impulsive decision maker. So how many here have heard of dialectical behavior therapy? Okay, a few, okay. So I'll talk a little bit about that first. So dialectical behavior therapy is a skill-based therapy where you learn different skills in each session, and it helps you kind of navigate distress, emotion regulation, mindfulness, and then interpersonal relationships. And so stop skill, and then the next one, the wise mind. Those are both taken from DBT. They're super helpful, super behavioral, which is nice and easy to implement. So if we think of the stop skill, the acronym is STOP. So it stands for like stopping, pausing, like literally just like staying in the same spot and not doing anything. Taking a step back, maybe taking some deep breath, taking a break. So, you know, if you're in a conversation and someone's asking you to make a decision, maybe, you know, say, I have to go to the bathroom real quick and just take a break for a second. Observe. So notice what is going on inside of you and outside of you. So kind of notice, all right, what's going on in the room? What am I feeling in my body? Am I feeling tense? I don't know, irritable, anxious? So observing that, and then proceed mindfully. So act with awareness, consider emotions and thoughts, and how to proceed effectively. So if we can pause and use the stop skill and take a step back, it kind of, well, obviously it helps prevent that impulsive decision, right? Because you're taking a break, pausing, and thinking about what could be the best decision. So it just is like a nice little gap in there to help someone think through their options. So that is the stop skill. Now for the undecided, again, this one's taken from the dialectical behavior therapy model. So who here is familiar with mindfulness? A fair amount, yeah, okay. So mindfulness is basically kind of being present in the moment, being aware of your current thoughts, right? Your current actions, doing things mindfully. So really kind of focusing in on the details in depth. Wise mind is a mindfulness skill. And so the dialectical behavior therapy model came up with a label for like different states of mind. So one is reasonable mind, which is where you're kind of logical, you're thinking kind of almost like a robot, if that makes sense. So you're very rational. So it says reasonable mind is cool, rational, and task focused. So it's kind of like, okay, I'm plugging away, I'm making all these like wise choices. The other state of mind is emotion mind, which is not the logical mind. So the emotion mind is you are reactive, you're kind of living in the different emotions that kind of come along with different situations. So it's, if we think of, so reasonable mind is cool, emotional mind is hot. So it's very, like I said, reactive, mood dependent. So depending on your mood, you're gonna make different choices and feel differently when you're in emotion mind. And it's very emotion focused. So what we would like to get people to is what they call wise mind. So that is a nice balance between the logical and the emotion mind. So they say wise mind is wisdom within each person. It is seeing the value of reason and emotion. So kind of incorporating both and seeing both as valuable. And then bringing the left brain and the right brain together to kind of make a decision or think about things. And they refer to it as the middle path. So, you know, if we think of going back to reasonable mind. So within reasonable mind, you're ruled by facts, reason, logic, pragmatics. Values and feelings aren't important. So kind of like I said, like robot brain. Emotion mind, you're ruled by moods, feelings, urges to do or say things. Facts, reason, and logic are not important. So not really thinking things through if you're an emotion mind. So we want to kind of bring those two together. So if we think of wise mind, it's kind of hard to describe if you've never kind of learned this skill before, but it's basically like kind of like an intuition. Like I know that this is probably going to be like a good choice. So it's kind of a peace with the choice. It's really just thinking like, okay, yeah, I feel this way, but kind of also thinking through it logically. And there's different skills in DBT that kind of help you get into wise mind as well. So there's, different mindfulness scripts that you can read of like, okay, I'm going to focus on, I think one is like, there's like a stone flake and you kind of watch it swirl to like the bottom of a lake. And as you get deeper and deeper, you kind of are, in that wise mind part of you. So it's very, very mindfulness based. But that's a very helpful skill for the undecided, because it helps you kind of have that intuition, that peace with, okay, this, could be a good choice. And it's hard to practice. So practicing it again when you're not in the midst of a crisis is going to be best. So for the avoider, this is another DBT. So for the avoider, we're going to use what we call opposite action. So opposite action is kind of one of the emotion regulation skills. So if we think of an emotion, every emotion has like an action urge. So for instance, fear might be to avoid, run away, escape. When someone's fearful or anxious, their urge typically is to do those things. If your emotion is anger, usually the action urge is like attack, lash out, scream, that sort of thing. And then sadness, usually the action urge is to withdraw. So, staying in bed, not getting up, not talking to people. So those are the action urges. And every emotion has an action urge. And so with the skill, we teach to like notice the emotion in your body, feel it in your body. So notice where you feel it, where you feel that urge, noticing the urge, and then committing to do the opposite. So it's very behavioral. It's very hard to do, especially if, we think of like the fear or sadness, right? And the anger too. You really don't want to get out of bed if you're feeling sad or depressed, right? So it can be very hard. But it's very helpful. It can help kind of propel you to impact your mood and change your mood. So for the avoider, if we think of using opposite action, the opposite action would be to not avoid. So this can kind of take various forms. You might, let's see, so if you're, I'm trying to think of an example, if you want to decide where to go out to dinner, for instance. That's a common in our house. So if you're wanting to choose that and you're an avoider person, you're like, okay, I'm not gonna make this decision. You might just put it off on the other person, or you might, start doing things around the house and try to procrastinate dinner. So if we think of acting opposite to that, it could be, okay, I really don't want to make this decision, but I'm going to, I don't know, look online and see like what the closest, like the 5 closest restaurants are. So that is kind of a small step, right? But you're acting opposite to the urge to avoid. So you're like, okay, here's 5 restaurants. And then from there, once you see those restaurants, you can kind of decide like, okay, like, I don't know, what are my top like 1 or 2 choices? So it kind of gets you into acting, right? So doing small things. So if we think of it from an anxiety perspective, say someone has a fear of like driving, for instance, right? Like, obviously, we're not gonna have them start driving on the highway. First, we'll have them, okay, we're gonna go sit in the car. We're not gonna avoid it. We're just gonna go sit in the car. Then I'm going to go, maybe start the car and just sit and listen to music in the car. So doing little baby steps to reach that opposite action. And so a lot of the baby steps could probably be like research, right? So if we think of big decisions, there are a lot of things to research typically for huge decisions. So if you think of, I don't know, like if you're planning like your will, for instance, you're gonna probably be researching a lot of things in order to figure out what all to put in there, who am I gonna talk to, that sort of thing. So you don't really have to make a huge decision yet, but you can decide to start researching things. So that is a skill for the avoider. And like I said, the other, if you're a procrastinator, I think the opposite action skill could be helpful as well. If you are indecisive, the opposite action skill can be helpful also. But just kind of, as you're noticing difficulties making decisions, thinking through, okay, which one of these categories do I fall into, and which one of these skills would best help me? And some people might like some of the skills more than others. That's why it's helpful to practice them beforehand, just to kind of see how it works for you, get familiar with it, and then from there you can kind of put it into practice. Okay. Other helpful tips. So we talked about how decisions get harder as we get towards the end of the day. One good strategy could be to make like really hard decisions in the morning before you've depleted that gas tank. So I don't know if you've got, some really hard decisions, try doing those, right after you first wake up, maybe after. Yeah, definitely after coffee. But so doing the hard things in the morning will give you a better decision-making quality. Delegating decisions when able is also another helpful strategy. So I think, if you're, I don't know, say you're in charge of, I don't know, an event or something, assigning tasks to other people. So, okay, this person, you're gonna figure out like what food choices we're gonna have. This person, you're in charge of decorations. And then, I don't know, this person can figure out where we're gonna have. So really delegating some of the decisions takes a lot of the pressure and fatigue off of someone. Sometimes you won't be able to delegate decisions, but if you're able to, that's a good strategy. And then if someone is presenting you with options, ask them maybe to just give you their top 2 or 3 options. So I'm sure all of you have bought a house at some point. Maybe not, but you've chosen where to live. So if we think of like working with a realtor, right? Like say, okay, I don't know, they might have like a list of like 10 places to look at, but you can kind of say like, okay, just give me the top 2 or 3 that you think are the best options. And that limits the amount of decisions you have to make pretty drastically. So asking for options when able. And then I was reading, when I was researching this presentation, I was reading about different people that definitely go to the extreme on reducing their choices. So, for instance, some people, they mentioned that some people have like the same exact breakfast every day. They just get up, they don't have to think about it, like that's what they're gonna have. You were mentioning that, I think it was your coworker, right? Like he bought like 10 identical shirts, 10 identical ties, 10 identical pairs of pants and shoes. And so that's what he wore. He just got up, put one on and didn't have to think about it.
That's why Steve Jobs always wore, black shirt and that.
Yeah, you're probably right.
It's one less decision he had to make in his job.
Yeah, makes sense. So those are small things that you can do, right? Or, I think we talk about, planning ahead. So the more that you can like reduce the daily decisions, the better. So, I don't know if you've got like, an event or something or an outing that you're gonna do. Try to do some of that planning like the day before maybe, so you don't have to make decisions on the fly. Creating routines for decision making in the moment. So, kind of saying like, okay, this is, when I have to make a decision, this is what I'm gonna do. Like I'm gonna, I don't know, sit down, go outside, get a drink of water, that sort of thing, just to kind of make it familiar. Reduce choices, and then automate some decision making. So like the food and clothes that I was mentioning. And even, schedules can be helpful, right? Like, so the one question of like, do I work out today? Some people work well with just kind of scheduling out different things that they have to do. So I don't know, on Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, I go to the gym in the morning or, however you want to structure your schedule for whatever decision. It just makes it easier because that's kind of like set in stone what you do. And then also, prioritizing sleep, exercise, self-care, and rest. So if we think of, just functioning in general as a human, right? Like we're not our best when we don't get sleep. We don't, maybe get like any outlet of exercise, and we're not feeling rested. We're always going to be functioning, less than if all those things were optimal. Those will definitely help you make your best decision. I think that is the last slide. So we can open it up for discussion or question. Are there any questions online? No?
Not yet.
What questions do you guys have? Or what scenarios can I help you with?
I have a question.
Yes.
I have well, first, my dad passed away in 2010.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So I moved in with my mom. And then she had heart condition, she's in advanced heart failure and all that other things. So I have a sister who's 4 years younger than me, who has 2 kids. Her oldest has ADHD and he wants to spend the night at the house all the time. And he wakes up at 3:30 in the morning, thinking that it's time to start playing and
Gotcha.
having a good time. And
Yeah.
he's 8 years old. And my sister doesn't understand why I can't have him spend the night. And it's a big long drama, but she got into a fight with my mom. And now my mom asks me, do I want Nicholas to spend the night? And then my sister's like, why can't you let him spend the night? You don't work.
Yeah.
It's just,
How is that not work?
yeah, and she says she needs a break,
Okay.
but.
She's wanting to delegate something.
Yeah, yes, she does, but she has no idea what I'm going through with my mom,
Right.
so I don't know.
Yeah, so you're wondering like how to make that decision?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, I guess I didn't mention this in the PowerPoint, but one helpful strategy for decision making can be just like listing out all possible scenarios and coming up with like the pros and cons for the different situations. So that kind of sounds like a situation that would be helpful for. Like, okay, these are the different ways I can answer her, and these are the different pros and cons of each scenario. That might help you simplify it a little bit to see it on paper. You could also practice doing the wise mind. So, if you are, thinking, with your emotional and rational mind, right? Like what feels like the best decision for you in that situation?
Right.
Yeah.
The last time you spent the night, I said, you cannot wake up. I said, if you wake up, I'll have a snack for you and you can eat that and go back to bed. Well, that didn't work.
Yeah.
So he's supposed to come over Friday
Okay.
and it's just, this whole week was a lot for me.
Sure. Yeah.
And then,
Well, yeah. So kind of really thinking of all the different, pieces that are going on in your life. Those would be incorporated into the wise mind, right? So, okay, I've got all of this other stress going on. I'm exhausted. You also probably want to, I don't know, help your sister maybe too. So that's part of the scenario. Don't want to help her? Okay. All right, we can take that later.
no, there's a lot that background where my mom has a lot of things going on and she doesn't either care or doesn't want to do anything about it.
Gotcha. Okay. So you're kind of fed up with her, it sounds like, yeah. Okay. But yeah, so just, considering all of those different scenarios and pieces and thinking, okay, like if I was in my wise mind, what would my decision be, or what would I say to her? Do you have an idea of what you would say if you were using wise mind?
Not right now.
Not right.
I just got off the phone with her.
Okay,
So,
okay,
But, he is spending the night, so
okay,
it was happening as I was coming in here. Oh,
gotcha. Well, now you have some skills that you can practice to try to see if you can navigate that situation. Yeah. Good question. Yeah. Yeah.
I was just gonna say, why don't you trade places with her?
Oh, that's a good idea, yeah.
And let her see what you're going through, and then she knows her son gets up, and doesn't need to do it at home.
well, she said that he could stay up later when he's over at our house. And then just recently, she said, if he doesn't go to bed at 8 o'clock, he wakes up at 3:30 in the morning. And I said, well, that would have been a nice piece of knowledge
Yeah.
to know. And then he does wake up a lot at home. But again, there was another thing, they have those little clocks now, that if the face is red,
They change colors.
I was just gonna say that my daughter did that. She has 3 boys and two of them are 11 months apart, and then the next one is a year younger than the youngest one.
Mhm.
And she said, you can't get out of bed until that light is green,
and
so.
they had that too, and they didn't tell me that either. So I'm like, oh, this is good. He has to go to bed at 8 or else he'll wake up in the middle of the night. And he has a clock at home that he knows he's not allowed to wake anyone up until it turns green. So thanks for the advice on that.
You guys made a lot of decisions.
And I think, too, sometimes the boys come over and they're allowed to do this at home or whatever. And I'll say, well, you're not at home, you're at my house now. So you go to bed at 8 o'clock tonight, you're not staying up.
Yeah, did you have a question?
Yeah, just a couple of things I want to clarify, because I'm also looking at this as like, if I was to explain it to someone else.
Sure.
From that kind of perspective.
Uh-huh.
Okay. And I was thinking about one of the reasons why sometimes I think making decisions are hard for us is because maybe we made what, like, if it was a big decision, and maybe it was what we perceived at the time as a bad decision.
Mhm.
You know, like we shouldn't have made that decision. I
Sure.
saw a video, I just happened to see it, I wasn't looking for it, but I thought it was so cool. This older woman was being interviewed, and she said, you know, when it comes to making decisions, you can't live in a parallel universe.
Right.
So you can't, the only way that you would know for sure which decision was going to be right is if you were able to live that life where, let's say it's between two jobs and it's, you know, UDF and Exxon.
Yeah.
Well, let's say you chose UDF. Well, you can't live a parallel life at Exxon. So, and I think that's when you talk about mindfulness, where the radical acceptance comes in as well, is like
Sure.
accepting. But, I think also too, like, I think a lot of times we're trying to gauge, like, what do we think? And I think it might even be helpful to write it down maybe,
Mhm.
like, especially like under that indecision piece. Like, what are the tools that you're, you know, for the undecided?
Yeah.
So I was kind of thinking that's more of like an umbrella. Like, we're all undecided, that's why we're here.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. And, not just writing down the pros and cons, but maybe what are we looking at as, what do we think are the rewards or the possible consequences
Mhm.
of a decision as
Yeah.
well? I don't know,
Sure. Yeah, I think that fits nicely,
in journaling maybe,
for sure,
you
yeah.
know, because if you're writing things down, like, if you can kind of get to the heart of like, why am I having a hard time with this? Like,
Yeah.
is it because I'm afraid I'm gonna make the wrong decision? Is it because I don't really know what to expect? Maybe I just need to gather some more information.
Right, yeah, maybe you don't pull the detail.
Yeah.
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 Definitely. Very good strategy.
I'm easier like, I'm just like, that word, you know? I just-
Yeah, no, that's helpful, yeah.
Yeah, I have
Yeah.
never, yeah, I think this was all really good,
Mhm.
really good. I
Yeah.
like looking at too, like realizing like what has a high impact
Mhm.
and what has a low impact.
Right,
And spending more time on those high impact decisions. Like if you
Right.
don't choose the right lunch today, it's not that big of a deal,
like, yeah, like,
you know?
not gonna be terrible. You don't need to spend a ton of energy
Right.
picking out the perfect lunch, yeah.
Exactly.
Adding on to that, I've heard of thinking of like time spans when you're weighing the importance of a decision, like, will this matter a week from now, a year from
I
now?
like that,
10
I
years
like
from now?
that,
That's
yeah.
pretty.
Yeah, I love that. I've heard that metaphor before too, yeah. Very helpful.
Doctor, can you repeat her question? They could not hear that online.
Oh, yeah, so I think you were mentioning, like, thinking of time spans, right, like with decisions, so if I make this decision, is this gonna matter like a week from now? Is it gonna matter a year from now? And you kind of use that gauge to place how much time you wanna spend on decisions. Yeah, how much you wanna, you know, make a decision. Yeah. Any questions online?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So the first question is in 26 parts. I'm kidding.
Okay, I was like, oh.
I am curious how many patients with ADHD may be further affected by decision fatigue?
Mhm.
What data has been shown, or what does the data show for these patients, and what techniques can they use to help them, aid them from experiencing decision fatigue? There is a second part. It says, what warning signs might caregivers look for to help with that family member?
Good question, yeah. I definitely think people with ADHD, definitely can be impacted more because they have, you know, they have so much that their stimuli going on in their mind, and it's hard to focus and pay attention, to kind of solidify a decision, right? And I can't remember where I heard this, but there's like the, paralysis, right? Like you don't know what decision to make, so you just kind of stand there and don't do anything. So I think the techniques that could be helpful would probably be, for the impulsivity, I would say that could be a helpful one. So, kind of stopping and pausing and maybe taking a break, maybe, for ADHD in particular, maybe doing, some energy outlet, so kind of being active can maybe help them focus more. And then I think, avoidance, I feel like they would probably avoid a lot of decisions, or procrastinate them. So all of those skills, I think, could be helpful for the ADHD individual. In terms of, what were they were wanting to
Like
know?
warning signs that you might recognize as a caregiver
Mhm.
and say,
For-
oh boy, they're about to,
Yeah, for people with ADHD?
yes.
Yeah, okay. I would say, if you're just noticing procrastinating and they're not making decisions, right? Like, maybe they're not doing the things that they need to do. They're, avoiding things would be a red flag. Also, if they're impulsively making decisions, like if they're, you're noticing a lot of like bad choices or, not great outcomes, that could be a red flag as well. Yeah.
There's another question in the chat. This person states that they have struggled dealing with decision fatigue and the side effects that parallel that in the workplace. Just curious if you could list off certain types of professions that the best case scenario for someone that has decision fatigue, as opposed to what line of work should be avoided.
Okay, well, I definitely would say maybe like a doctor, a medical doctor could be avoided. There's a lot of decision making with that profession. What lines of work would be helpful? Well, I would say maybe like a kind of anything that's monotonous, right? Like a factory job where you're like boxing things up, or maybe Amazon delivery, or I don't know. Assembly line, right? Like you got one thing to do and you just keep doing it. Yeah. Don't make any. Other professions to avoid, I don't know, yeah, okay, yeah.
Right.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, that's a good one too, yeah. Yeah, anything that requires a lot of thought would be hard, I feel like, a lot of choices. Any other questions?
Does anyone have a short, concise way to explain this phenomenon to people when they are asking for help? I'm thinking of a very common response, such as, why can't you make this decision?
Yeah, I mean, I would say, I've made a lot of decisions and my brain's tired. Easy response, or, like my gas tank is empty. So just kind of using some quick, simple metaphors.
The only other thing that's in the chat, doctor, is the fact that they said that one of the things that they always think about is that once you make a decision, even if it turns out poorly, learn how to forgive yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, there's never, hindsight is always 20/20, right? Like you're making the best decision you feel like you can make at that time. And there are definitely gonna be times when decisions don't turn out great. That's part of, learning, and right, like you learn as you go. Yeah, I like the forgiveness. I think, was there someone else that had their hand raised earlier?
It's me. I
Yeah.
don't know if it's a really good question or just a thought, but decision making, like when you're with family or friends, whether you're like hosting or just casual, things come up and you feel like you've got to like make decisions, what the group does, and everybody,
Yeah.
so everybody's happy at the same time. I'm not, a lot of this probably can be incorporated in that idea, but that's kind of where I get like little, make decisions for other people come up.
Yeah, right. Yeah, at our family get-togethers, it's always like, okay, like when do we want to eat? And like, I don't know, no one can make a decision, and yeah. So I think that could be where you like delegate maybe. Or just kind of have like a set thing, like, okay, this is, I don't know, this is the schedule for the event that we're doing, and so, yeah. But it's hard when you have to make a lot of decisions for a lot of people. Do you have an example of like a decision that has come up?
Oh, they're not. Not right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah,
I think oh, yeah, that's an idea, having a kid who wants to see better.
Yeah.
You get, people say they don't care.
yeah, that happens a lot, yeah.
They do.
They do.
It's a good idea.
Yeah. Yeah, usually people say they don't care and you gotta watch them because they really do care.
They really do care because they don't eat it.
Yeah,
They're not very interested.
yeah. But yeah, I think that's a common problem for people. So I like the idea of like voting or,
And maybe give them a list, of, like 3 things, you
Yeah.
can vote on one of these 3 things.
Right.
Like, don't let the, not infinite possibilities.
oh yeah, that'd be a lot. We might end up making like 10 meals.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. Any other questions? Yeah,
How do you deal with a person who doesn't think they have a problem or ADHD hasn't caused them any problems? And no matter how respectfully, peacefully you offer suggestions, I'm talking about my son.
okay,
That he doesn't accept offers for, I know using the word help is bad now, Jim, offers of assistance, or I'm using a better word for assistance.
yeah. So, how to kind of educate him that he's struggling?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess I would, kind of just pointing out, different, like, I don't know, I'm guessing you're noticing that he's like frustrated or having like,
Well, this is a 10-year term,
okay,
so Boston,
okay, how old is,
35.
okay. Yeah, I guess, just kind of probing and asking questions could be a good, option, so, hey, I don't know, how do you feel like this turned out, or like, are you satisfied with ... So just kind of helping him think more broadly about what it is that, you see. Helping him get some more insight into it. I don't know if that helps, but
Well, it's, no offense, it's certainly easier said than done.
it is,
If the brain chemistry doesn't function in a way that, oh, I
Yeah.
do need help.
sure,
You can't bribe a person or
yeah,
can't drag them
right.
to wherever.
Yeah, so yeah, and that's why I think helping them see like what the scenario is, helping him want to change or want to improve things is gonna be where you come at it. Cause you're right, you can't make him see that, he's struggling. But yeah, you can always try, I don't know if you'd be interested in therapy, you could try to get him into therapy to help with that too.
From the current world, any term that I use that's medically, psychiatrically created is automatically
Acknowledged too, yeah.
not acknowledged.
Yeah, that's tough, especially, with someone, an old, like an adult, right? Yeah. Any other questions? Did you say there was one online?
Another one on chat, yes, it's, excuse me. Would you please recommend some online resources to obtain further information and practice DBT?
Oh, DBT, okay. Yes, I would say, well, if they're super interested in DBT, we have DBT groups at the Lindner Center, that they could inquire about. We also, if they wanted to just learn more about DBT, they could look up, Marsha Linehan. She created DBT. And there's lots, I think there's like a, I don't know the exact website, but there's a website, for that where, there's research and things like that and books that you can buy and read. Any other questions?
Says, if you fall into the categories of procrastination or avoidance, how do you break the perception that others may have that they just don't fully understand? Example would be, you're just being lazy.
Yeah. So, kind of just explaining to them how hard it is and how, having them maybe some research to look at to understand that, yeah, like people definitely are not lazy if they're procrastinating or avoiding. They might be struggling with a variety of different things. And so just educating them on what it is that is causing the difficulty.
Can we develop ADHD as an adult, living our adult lives? Sometimes I wonder if I have it. I don't, not in the way of being physically, I heard that my brain just
Yeah. Going
racing
over.
and short circuiting,
Yeah.
not staying focused.
Yeah, there is something, called like adult ADHD. I think, people can develop it at any point. Most commonly it's seen in kids, like developing in kids. But yeah, there are a fair amount of adults that I see that have, struggle with it. Maybe they might have been missed when they were little, like they masked it well. And they were pretty high functioning enough to like do well in school and things like that. But yeah, as people get older, it's harder to focus on things sometimes.
Is that normal?
I think, yeah, to a point, yeah, to a point. It is.
Before I heard of your talk of decision fatigue, my husband understands this better. My friend and I, we call it decision overload. We
Okay.
can't make they understand, my husband's an engineer and he can make decisions immediately.
Easily, okay.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, for everyone. And,
Okay.
You go.
and they're very logical. He's very logical.
Yeah, he's not like even logic, like, yeah.
And I am totally not logical, but
Gotcha.
that's what we call it. Just, we can't make another decision. There's too many. I'm overloaded. Yeah.
Yeah, ask me tomorrow, yeah.
Well, he asked me first thing in the morning. I'm not a morning person. And I
Gotcha.
said, is this a matter of life or death for today? If not, can we visit it a little bit? I'm saying it nicely to you, but can we?
Like, if it's not a 10 out of 10, do not ask me. It's all the time, yeah.
Yes.
Cute, I like it.
Yes, someone to make decisions.
Well, yeah.
One of the questions in your doc is, could you just, what is DBT?
Oh, sure, yeah. So, dialectical behavior therapy, it is a mix of, it's got a lot of different therapies incorporated into it. So, behavior, cognitive, mindfulness, so bringing in some of the mindfulness strategies. So if we think of, it kind of is helpful for disorders that kind of use a under-controlled coping. So they tend to be, have trouble regulating their emotions. They tend to have some like interpersonal difficulties. So they become distressed easily. So there's 4 different modes in the therapy. So there's mindfulness, where you learn kind of how to be present and mindful. That's kind of like the base core, like the foundation that runs through all of the DBT. And then you have distress tolerance, which is helping the person de-escalate their intense distress in the moment quickly so that they can kind of be more in wise mind. And then there's emotion regulation, which can help, have more stable moods and navigate through life. That's where the opposite action comes from, is from emotion regulation. And then the last one is interpersonal effectiveness. So kind of being able to communicate effectively with others, like asking for things, maybe saying no to things, while preserving relationships. That's a quick synopsis.
And then I'm assuming they're referring to the Lindner Center because they say, do you still offer DBT groups for adolescents and parents?
Yes, I know there's an adolescent group. Do we know if there's parents in it as well?
No. There's DBT groups for adults, for the general, but
Yeah.
not necessarily.
Right.
So the answer was,
We definitely have adolescent DBT groups. I don't think there's a group where there's like an adolescent and a parent together.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Is that all the online one?
I think that was at least, wait. Would you please offer some ways to deal with others' emotions to weighty decisions? For example, I'm my parents' POA. It would like some advice regarding dealing with the other family members.
Okay, okay. Well, I don't necessarily know the whole situation, so I'm not gonna give a ton of specific advice, but I would say, you know, going back to some of these, strategies, I don't know, if you find yourself in one of those categories, practicing the skill that goes along with it. But power of attorney, definitely has a lot of decision making in it, so that sounds like a very difficult role. And it sounds like maybe she's making decisions for a lot of different people. So, you know, go kind of talking openly with them and kind of coming to a consensus on, you know, what do we think is the best solution to maybe delegating some of that, getting some feedback from others. All right, thanks for coming, you guys.
There's a group flyer on the table if anybody's interested. There's DBT, you can check out on this flyer as well. So
Yeah, we offer a lot of DBT groups. Yeah.
thank you, Dr. Brown.